I'm gonna start off by saying that I somehow managed to avoid spoilers for this movie for the most part in the 2-ish months that it took for it to be released here in North America, and I'm mentioning this because I had no idea what I was getting myself into. And while I enjoyed the movie for the most part, there's a lot that, just my opinion, wasn't done quite right, or just quite as well, necessarily, as I would have wanted it to be done. There's this thing with anime movies, and just movies that are based on shows in general, is that they're kind of hard carried by your love for that show. Because if you asked any random person off the street to watch a movie from a franchise that they've never seen, they'll probably be bored, or at least they might be bored because the movie itself is just kind of meh, and they have no attachment to the characters, so they won't be biased, you know? A lot of these anime movies, specifically anime movies, they kind of rely on your love for these characters for you to actually say whether you like them or not. I'm saying all this because One Piece Film Red is essentially a musical, and yes, that's kind of fucked up for me to say because this is literally based on a battle shonen, but you heard me, this is a musical. But honestly, it's not a bad one. The problem is that it leans too heavily on your love for these characters, like I said. First off, yes, I know that they're showing off Uta in all the promotional material. She's singing, she's doing this, whatever. That doesn't mean that people assumed it was going to be a musical. I certainly didn't, and I know for a fact, well, maybe not a fact, but I'm pretty sure that most people did not go into a One Piece movie expecting to get a musical. And I definitely felt it in my theater when I went to go see it, because as the movie went on, people were kind of more and more bothered by the songs, and it sucks because some of the songs were actually pretty good. But I think it would have been better if it was clear that the movie was going to contain so many musical segments, which, to be fair, they do fit within the narrative of the movie, so it's not like they get in the way of the action or anything. It's not like they slap a video clip in the middle of nowhere. On the contrary, actually, sometimes the singing is actually the background music for the fighting, and it fits really well. But it's when we get like a Disney princess type singing segment that I could literally feel the people around me rolling their eyes. Secondly, I'll come out and say that while this wasn't as fan servicey as Stampede was, because that movie was, God, it was just fan service all over, and I loved it. But let's call it what it is. Honestly, this movie isn't too far off. We get to see basically all the fan favorite characters that aren't Straw Hats, so sometimes they kind of have to be shoehorned into the story just to be on screen for a total of literally 30 seconds throughout the movie. And if you've seen it, you know who I'm talking about. If you haven't, you will see. And it's definitely noticeable at some point, but it's fine. It's not like I walked into this expecting a personal story with minimal character interactions, just the main characters, you know, just interacting between each other. Not at all. But it's kind of a shame, to be honest, because I feel like that's what this movie should have been, and that's kind of what it wanted to be too. The main character isn't any of the regulars, it's actually Uta. And honestly, she's a really interesting character in my opinion, that's tied to probably the most intriguing character in the entire, show, which is Shanks. So what went wrong? Well, it's that they have decided to focus on her and have decided that they wanted to make money. So here comes unnecessary fights and unnecessary cameos. Also, I'm not a hypocrite, so let me be perfectly clear. I was geeking throughout the entire fucking movie, seeing all my favorite characters. Like, I had a permanent smile on my face during the ending brawl, and I love the inclusion of certain characters that we really don't see that often. Certain characters that we haven't seen in a while. But I can also recognize that Uta's character was more interesting than a few cameos, and I just kind of wish we got more development for her, because everything moves kind of fast when it comes to her development. We see her when she's a kid, we see her during her teen years, we see her when she's an adult. We don't, we see all the stages of her life that are important, but we don't spend enough time on any of those stages. It's just kind of unfortunate because she is an interesting character that has interesting reasons for the things that she does. I think this movie kind of devolves into something that it has to be because it's a big budget One Piece anime movie. It has to end in a certain way. But it didn't have to go that way, and I think it would have been a better outcome if it really didn't go the typical route that these movies have gone in the past, or at least recently. But really, everything moves kind of fast in general in this movie, to be honest, especially the fights. Like, the final fight is the only real one. All the others either get interrupted mad early on, or they just really aren't fights. So you gotta ask, what are they doing if they're not fighting, but they're also not developing their characters? Well, they're just kind of bullshitting. When there is fighting happening, however, sometimes it's just kind of hard to tell what's going on because there's a lot of shit happening on screen. And by the way, the animation was great for sure, possibly the best One Piece has ever looked, other than a few segments in Wano, but those don't really count. Until I get full episodes like 10-15, those few segments are just taken as that, just a few segments. But anyways, this isn't a comment on that. It's just that certain parts of the movie could have benefited from simply zooming out. Like, there's so many, like, zoom out from the character's face for him to do an attack type of thing, but it happens back to back sometimes, so I'm just fucking there having whiplash in my seat in the theater because we keep zooming in and out of people's faces as all they do is do their attacks one by one like they're playing a turn-based RPG. Like, it's jarring the amount of times that they do something like that just because they want everybody to get their one-liners in, they want everybody to get their attack names in. It's actually crazy how many times throughout this movie they do this. And some of the fighting also happens in a pretty barren area with very little difference across the landscape at some point. So it just feels like all these animations are being played over a stationary background, and it really doesn't help the eye fucking that's happening to me in my seat. It's kind of hard for me to even tell what's going on, which is weird. You would think if you just play these animations over a, you know, just a blank background, I would know what's going on. Not really, no. No. Don't do that. Don't do it again. Don't do that ever again. Obviously, this movie isn't all bad. I'm not going to sit here and lie and say that. The humor lands pretty much all the time. One Piece is a funny anime. This movie doesn't change that. It is pretty funny. You love to see your favorite characters interacting in ways that they don't really get to interact that much in the main continuity or in the main storyline because they just don't really have that many chances to meet with each other. So that's always cool. There's obviously the fighting is great. Apart from those moments that I mentioned earlier, the fighting is great when you can see what the fuck's going on. I just, you know, I could sit here and praise this movie on things that One Piece does well just in general, but I'm just more here to mention the things that I did not really like as much. But overall, I think it's a good package. It's just, you know, there's some things I gotta nitpick. I feel like if you asked any non-One Piece fan to watch this, well, first off, they'd probably be confused. But I also think it's just that they might not like it that much because there's so much that will probably alienate them. And honestly, it's a shame because, like I said, Uta is a very interesting character, and a more intimate story about her, Luffy, and Shanks would have been amazing because the seeds are already there. But I think that what we got was still decent, even with all the flaws. I'm going to do my best impression of an unbiased reviewer, and I'm going to rate this a 6.5. I wanted to love this so much, but I don't want to be unfair too. If I put on my pair of rose-tinted glasses and my straw hat and I stop trying to give these movies fair scores, I'm just giving this a 10 out of 10 because it's a banger. It's a banger just because Luffy was in it, and also Jinbei, the goat Jinbei. But I've seen better One Piece movies, and realistically, this one just kind of ranks somewhere in the middle.